I can't turn that off. Good afternoon. I'm Chief Master Sergeant Randy Anderson, U.S. Air Force retired, former Air Commando. Today's topic is Operation Just Cause in Panama. Each month over the next several months, SOF Stories Live will invite former special operators represented from every service branch of U.S. SOCOM and explore past campaigns and operations focusing solely on the historical context of special operations involvement from a personalized perspective. All guests are former special operators who served at the operationally deployed level. We will selectively choose officers and enlisted members for a particular topic based on their actual involvement and personal involvement in various operations, not from the campaign point of view, but as special operators at the tactical level. This venue will give them a unique opportunity to share with you, the audience, their insights and unbiased experiences from their personal point of view, some of it widely documented in publications and film, some of it not. Please bear in mind the experiences are often decades removed from an operation, so any historical inconsistencies or unintentional have not been specifically previewed or cleared for release by the Department of Defense, nor does it represent their views. We ensure all content involving special operations or specific operation has been either unclassified and or publicly released prior to the broadcast. Therefore, it's important to emphasize the primary intent of SOF Stories Live is to present and disclose their stories as they are remembered exclusively by the special operator who experienced them. This December marks the 31st anniversary of the events surrounding the U.S. invasion of Panama, codenamed Operation Just Cause. Note for the audience to prevent interruption, ensure your microphones are muted during the entire broadcast. You'll be given the opportunity to submit questions for our guests at the end of the presentation via the chat function. It is an honor and a privilege to introduce the moderator for today's podcast, Master Sergeant Mark Stevens, U.S. Army retired. Mark is a former U.S. Army Special Operator, serving his career as a Special Forces Green Beret in various classified assignments. Mark is currently the chairman of the board for Task Force Dagger Special Operations Foundation, U.S. SOCOM, to provide assistance and wounded for those members and their families. The Task Force Dagger Foundation responds to urgent needs, conducts rehabilitative adaptive events, RAE, and provides next generation health solutions for issues facing our special operations service members. Thank you, Mark, for your service both in and out of uniform, and thank you for joining us today. Please introduce today's guests.
You got it. Hey, Randy. Thanks for the introduction. Really appreciate it, and I'm honored to be able to do this today. Today, the SOF Stories Live is honored to welcome 3 special operators who executed high-risk missions while serving in some of the nation's most highly trained and secretive units during Operation Just Cause in Panama. From the successful hostage rescue of an American citizen, taking away the Panamanian military's ability to communicate and fight, to conducting the hectic hunt for General Manuel Noriega, these special operators were in the dangerous forefront and pivotal moment in the special operations history and helped force successful U.S. foreign policy. So today, I have the honor to welcome Clifford J. Bailey, James or Jim Moye, and Randy Jones. How you doing, guys? Welcome to the SOF Stories Live, and thank you for sharing your stories with us today. Before I get started, I'd like to give the audience a little history on Operation Just Cause, kind of put it into context. In May 1989, during Panamanian national elections, an alliance of parties opposed to the Noriega dictatorship counted the votes from the country's election precincts before they were sent to the district centers. Their tally showed their candidate Mr. Ndara, defeating pro-Noriega candidate Carlos Duque by nearly a 3-1 margin. The next day, Ndara was physically assaulted by Noriega supporters while riding in his motorcade. Noriega declared the election null and maintained power by force, insisting that he had won the presidential election and that any irregularities had been on the part of U.S.-backed candidates. President George H.W. Bush called on Noriega to honor the will of the Panamanian people, and the United States reinforced its Canal Zone garrison and increased the tempo of training and other activities intended to put pressure on Noriega. In October of 1989, Noriega foiled a coup attempt by members of the Panamanian Defense Force, or known as the PDF, led by Major Giraldi, who was subsequently beaten to death. On 15 December, the Panamanian General Assembly passed a resolution declaring that that a state of war existed between Panama and the United States. The next day, 4 U.S. military personnel were stopped at a roadblock near the PDF headquarters in the El Chorillo neighborhood of Panama City. Marine Captain Richard Haddad, Navy Lieutenant Michael Wilson, Army Captain Barry Rainwater, and Marine First Lieutenant Robert Paz had left. They had left the Fort Clayton military base and were on their way to have dinner downtown Panama City. The U.S. Department of Defense reported that the servicemen had been unarmed, were in a private vehicle, and attempted to flee only after their vehicle was surrounded by an angry crowd of civilians and PDF troops. The PDF opened fire, claiming that the Americans were armed on a reconnaissance mission. Lieutenant Paz was fatally wounded by a round that entered the rear of the vehicle and struck him in the back. Captain Haddad, the driver of the vehicle, was also wounded in the foot. Paz was rushed to the Army hospital, but died of his wounds. According to the U.S. military sources, a U.S. naval officer and his wife witnessed the incident and were detained by the Panamanian Defense Force soldiers. While in police custody, they were assaulted by the PDF. The U.S. naval officer spent 2 weeks in the hospital recovering from the beating. PDF soldiers sexually threatened and groped his wife. The next day, President Bush ordered the execution of the Panama invasion plan named Operation Just Cause. This military set H hour as 0100 on 20 December 1989. So during Operation Just Cause, I was assigned to 7th Special Forces Group, 1st Battalion, and we had a pre-planned mission getting ready to go to Guatemala. So we were kind of out of play and standing by because we had done previous operations in the tank farm, as I stated earlier, when the United States was putting pressure on Noriega. And so we had a planned mission and we were set to do that. So then everything kicked off. So that was kind of where I was at and what I was doing at the time. Jay, how about you? What was your rank at the time, your position, your assignment when you learned you were going to go to Panama?
First off, thanks, Mark. And I'd like to thank everyone that has made this possible and thinking of me to help out with this podcast. I really appreciate it. It's an honor and a privilege to be in such great company of men such as yourself, James, Randy, and Rick. At the time, I was a staff sergeant in Alpha Company, 1st Battalion, 7th Special Forces Group. And I was on ODA 712, floating back and forth between that and the B team since they was short of communication sergeant. It just so happened to be that our company was already in Panama when the invasion had started. We was over on Fort Sherman, working out of Battery Pratt, if y'all familiar with that area over there. And we were doing company live fires, moving to contact drills, just doing our usual train up, getting ready to do some deployments further down in Central and South America later on that next year. We found out about the mission more or less the night of the 18th, coming back after some training on Battery Pratt. So our first concern was trying to gather up all our gear and equipment, and we packed up and moved our way to Albrook Airfield on the morning of the 19th.
Yeah.
And that's when we started settling in with the other companies.
Got it. How about you, Jim?
Yes, hey, thanks. Thanks for considering me for this segment of SOF Stories. I really appreciate it. I gotta tell you, it's gonna be tough for me because, you know, nothing ruins a good war story like a live witness, and there's still a lot out there. So I'll have to be careful what I say. But my rank, summer of '89, I was just pinned on my E6, which was a big deal for me because I'd been assigned to a SOF unit that specialized in counterterrorism for almost 2 years, and I felt like I was the only E5 there. I was promoted against my old MOS was the problem back in those days, and so it took a while to catch up. But I was just a lowly 203 gunner on my team, the low guy, which is actually a good position to have. No meetings, no reports to write, just blow things up and shoot things. All that summer, we had oriented our training toward Panamanian type missions, but I really didn't find out what we were going to be doing until August, when we rotated down to Howard, swapped out with an sister element, and was briefed on what our role was going to be.
Got it. No, I appreciate it. Hey, Randy, how about you? Randy,
That was the time. Thank you again. Appreciate it, Mark, and all you guys. It's so pleasant to see some familiar faces. I could tell right now in Rick's case, he's aging a lot better than I am. But it's nothing better than vintage years. At the time, I was a Master Warrant Officer 4, which was an unusual grade. It only existed for a couple of years in the active duty Army. It was changed between the Chief Warrant Officer 4 and the approval of the CW5 rank. And it just came to my thought process. Never even thought about it, but I was able to serve in combat operations in the military through every warrant officer grade, W1, W2, W3, Master Warrant Officer 4, and CW5. So it was an interesting career to say the least. My function here in this particular mission was the senior mission planner on behalf of the regiment. This was a heavily close air support construed mission that came up. There were actually 4 scenarios that we were responsible for. And I, as a senior lead for B Company 1st Battalion, did the initial planning. We all had done rehearsals before we went down. In fact, we'd been in country and done some rehearsals, and they had live fire, not in Panama, but we had live fire at other locations, austere locations where they built the semblance of the prison and some other infrastructure there, but which was a great benefit. So was the organization who, by the time we went to Panama, we had about 10 years under our belt after National Command Authority decided they needed to stand up force. That we all had combat experience. We had certainly had a lot of flight experience at the time, and had become accustomed to good resourcing, as did all of us. I think we were well resourced within the capabilities of our individual departments of defense, and were able to train for the mission. So.
That's awesome. To get into the meat of this whole thing, and I want to go through it with each one of you, but what were the different missions you were given, and what were some of the major challenges you had, and what was your problem solving, or how did you solve them? Jay.
As I mentioned earlier, the first thing for us was getting over to Albrook Airfield from Battery Pratt, Fort Sherman. We moved up first thing in the morning, and once we got to Albrook, we linked up with our sister unit, C37, which happened to be the SIP that was already stationed down there. Mm-hmm. So they was already pretty much given all their missions, and we just fell in on it because they started running short of personnel, between the radio towers, the TV towers, and the Pecora Bridge. So I was attached to one of the teams that was going to one of the radio towers / TV stations to cut off the communication links between Noriega and some of his outstations and their PDF elements. So pretty much we just started loading out our gear, prepping all the helos, and getting our target sets ready. Leading right into the mission, and Rick can probably attest to this, is that HR is supposed to be around 1 o'clock in the morning, something around there. But pretty much all hell broke loose a little bit earlier than that. So rounds started coming through the Albrook hangar, and our helo was only able to get one fast rope onto it. So it was on the other side of the door, left side of the door. They just told us to launch and get out of there and just go straight to our targets. So we loaded the helos with the gear we could grab and all our equipment and anti-tank weapons, everything we needed to conduct the mission. The funny part of this is, like I was saying, fast forward just a little bit, we get to the target and it is dark as I don't know what. And, we're supposed to be fast roping. Of course, I'm on the door that doesn't have a fast rope, right? So we're pulling into the field over there by the radio tower, like everything was planned. And the other team goes out, rope goes out, they start sliding down the rope. We look over the other side and it just looks like the Kuna grass. Remember, the Kuna grass is like 4, 5 feet tall, maybe at the most 6 feet tall. And they said, oh, we can jump from here, be a soft landing. Well, the first guy goes out on my side and he just disappears. I don't see him anywhere. I'm like looking back at the second guy. It's like, well, we got to go. So I jump out and I must have fell like 10 to 15 feet. And it ends up being the baby bamboo trees. So it ended up breaking all of our falls. But in the meantime, it was like a yard sale because the anti-tank weapon I had on my back, it got ripped off of me. My helmet got ripped off of me. My sling was snatched off my weapon, but I was holding on to so tight, landing on the ground. And it was just like a Three Stooges movie, going into the target at first, because people was falling on top of each other coming out because of the way the ropes were landing and everything. But we moved the breach to the radio tower. And I forgot to mention, we did have a tech with us because they were supposed to, once we breached, they were going to go in, remove tubes and everything to shut down the towers. So we moved the breach, we get up there, and like a real good engineer, I guess they must use a P for plenty on the door charge. And once that door charge went off, it just went maybe 20 to 30 feet through this facility. So there was pretty much no need for the tech guy to come up inside there, but he comes up and just gives a thumb up because the door done all the damage that it needed to do. So we didn't have to remove any tubes out of it. So pretty much mission accomplished for that night. Radio towers down, and we just sat up there the rest of the night until we got picked up in the morning time.
How about you, Jim?
Yes, sorry, trying to find the mute button. Yeah, my team, I was just very fortunate to be on a team that was chosen as part of a 23-man force going in to rescue Kurt Muse. He was an American citizen held captive by Noriega. It's a long story. He wrote all about it in his book, 6 Minutes to Freedom, good read. But he was a true American patriot that got caught up in the political turmoil. This mission was a top priority, not just because of his status, but he had been assigned a prison guard specifically to torment and execute him if the Americans tried to pull anything. And so if the invasion kicked off, it had to be in the opening shots, but it was actually also a standalone mission for months prior to that, because Noriega was using him as political leverage. If you keep pushing me, I'm going to put this guy on trial, prosecute him as a spy, and execute him. So to take that leverage away, he had to come out of the prison one way or the other. The prison was right across the street from the commandancia, the Noriega's military headquarters. So it was a challenge. If it didn't go with the invasion, it would have been a fight. my actual job on the mission was part of the roof security team. Each of us had a designated guard tower to control and then eliminate any hostile actions in our sector as they presented themselves. A group of us had to also prep to do a follow-on mission to clear the whole prison. If Muse wasn't found in a cell, we were going to go down and clear. And in those days, you didn't clear with saws and 203s and stuff. So we had to develop gun light mounts for the saw, the 203s, the aim point mounts for a saw. And the gun lights, remember, were big C-cell batteries. They weren't the little LEDs. So that was somewhat of a challenge. But I'd have to say the major challenge we had for this mission was the lift restriction of the little birds. We had to have, the plan was take 23 in and bring 24 out. And maybe Randy can expound on that more, but we didn't have the 5-blade little birds yet, and with their performance. So we had to weigh in every single rehearsal, and there's a guy standing there with a clipboard, and if you couldn't add an extra magazine, an extra frag, or a candy bar, they had it written down, and it was that tight. And it became a factor during the mission itself. But one night, in fact, we were rehearsing on the elementary school on the base, had a pretty much the size of the prison, and a little bird took a tail strike because of lift, which was a CI nightmare because the kids are coming to school in a few hours. But the next day was the amazing part, as I sat in the hangar and the pilots and mechanics are pulling out instruments. You know, we got 2 of these, we don't need that. Who needs a cannibular bearing? Who wants a fire extinguisher in a combat zone? But they were trying to give us every advantage they could. If we were going to hang it out there, they were too, and that's 1/60th way. So in fact, I know 2 of the birds only had 1 pilot on it on the rehearsals. I can't remember if the actual mission went with one. Some of them had 1 pilot. Maybe Randy remembers. But that was the big challenge, was just the weight. After that, it was just looking for Elvis missions as Intel developed about where Noriega was, is a bunch of follow-on.
Got it. How about you, Randy? Randy Jones? You're on mute, sir.
Oh, thought I clicked it. Can you hear me now?
Sir.
Okay. You just mentioned something that made me remember. We had weight limitations with the AH-6, the light attack aircraft as well. And we've since modified those aircraft. They got better engines, transmission, and I got 6 blades on them instead of 5. And I got a 4-bladed tail rotor, and they've increased the gross weight. When we first started flying, it was 2,280 pounds, and now it's well over 4,000 pounds. So, but we throw more stuff in there. We doubled the weapons capability with wing stores and stuff. But that was one of the innovative things. But what happened on this particular mission, 3 of our targets were within, 10 or 15 minutes of Howard Air Force Base, 3 of the 4 close air targets. My target, which was Rio Hato, was 70 miles away. And there were no friendly forces down there. It was all bad guys. It was a mech infantry unit and of course, whatever airfield security forces they had. And the problem with that is when you're only carrying 7 rockets and 1 minigun with 4,000 rounds of bullets, you try to be innovative. And I talked the regiment commander, who happened to be there with us, into letting us take the 7-shot pod off and put a 19-shot rocket pod on a little bird. If you don't think something looks funny, and particularly when you're hovering and the thing's leaning over like this because you got so much weight on the outside, but we carried 19-shot pods, and we also I came up with the concept we need to use triple redundancy when it came to whether it was munitions or fuel or whatever it was. When you're that far away from friendly forces, I can't afford to stop the close air support for the ground guy to fly back down there for an hour and 10 or 15 minutes just to refuel or rearm. So I had an MH-60 loaded up with a team with rockets and fuel and stuff that they could pump to us. and we secured a site for them on the ground on the assault. And I also had an airborne drop, which had one of the 160th group of folks on there at that. So we solved our problem as far as being able to at least have some backup for rearm and refuel for the assault at Rio Hondo.
Oh, wow. Awesome. So, this was a pretty pivotal event during that time. So what impressed or inspired you, during these events? What made you laugh? What pissed you off? Just kind of, give everybody kind of a sense of that perspective, when all this was going on. Jay, I'll start with you.
I would say what impressed me the most is not having worked with another team or a unit, because you have your usual team, ODA 712. You might work with your teams within your company, but not with a company outside of that. So I would say what impressed me the most was, of course, always the professionalism they treated me with the outsider coming into their team, and how they brought me in, and how fast we came to understand one another, and overall, how we conducted the mission without any rehearsals. If you think about it, this happened so fast from our perspective that we were able to carry out, I don't know how many missions there were that night, at least 8 or 9 missions going on at the same time across the board. And we didn't have the technology that we have today, where you can see everything, in the job on the TV screen or anything like that. It was all time driven.
Yeah.
Or, you had your codes, whatever it is, then you knew people were in place to do what you need to do. So I think that, looking back, that is really impressive, how we pulled that off so fast with the technology that we had back then. And pretty much what I would say funny part, of course, besides the story falling out of a helicopter with, everything getting pulled off of you and the breach, was, like I told you before, our SOC South commander, Colonel Jacoby, great guy. He kind of reminds me of our old unit commander, tall, lanky guy. But I guess he wanted to troop the lines one day over on Albrook, that was the morning of the 19th, or day of the 19th, if you will. And I think, like Rick had mentioned, something that happened someplace else on the other side of the airfield. So he decides to jump into this APC, commander vehicle with the hatch on it and everything. So he's driving across the field over there, and you can see this thing just dip. And I guess they forgot to tell him you need to latch that latch back there. That thing came forward, knocked him in the back of the head. I know he must have seen stars for like 3 weeks, because that hatch hit him in the back of the head. But that was one of those funny stories that's just like, you're looking across, it's like, did that really happen? Really? So, and he'll never live it down either. Never live it down. But great guy. And as far as being pissed off, looking back, it was a crazy time, but it was a good time. I think it brought a lot of people together, and we've been friends ever since, and just a great bunch of guys during a crazy fast time.
That's awesome, man. Did you guys give him a new call sign?
I wasn't gonna do that. I was just still a staff sergeant. I had a career to look after.
Oh, that is awesome. That would have been amazing to see. Hey, Jim, what do you got, brother?
Got nothing like that. Oh, I guess what made me laugh, not at the time it happened, but we landed on the prison roof, and I ran to my position, and the whole prison's lit up with Christmas lights. Who does that? Who puts Christmas lights on a prison? All I could think of was the movie John Belushi in 1941 saying, "We got to put out these Christmas lights," shooting up the town. The other, you can see them along the forward edge of that picture there. It's hard to see. The sparkles in the bottom corner is my 203 round going off, but all those other lights are the Christmas lights. They went out somewhere between the green and red tracers. They went out as well. But the other funny thing that wasn't funny at the time was the corner where I was at had a little bitty 6-inch wall for me to take cover behind, whereas everybody else had this big 4-foot wall. Okay, so maybe it wasn't 6 inches. I didn't know you were going to show the picture, but you can see it does drop down. And I remember looking over at Chris with the Mag 58, and he's hid behind that real big square thing with all that cover, and I just was like, man, who gave me this spot? But yeah, it was in the intel. You can see it there, but it just didn't dawn on me. The thing that impressed me the most about this was the intel. The duration of the captivity made it such that people were allowed to visit Kurt, and they were obviously trained. Some were trained assets for collecting. They came out with highly detailed information. The bottom of the screen there, you see the mock-up of the prison that was made in Hurlburt. It only has the 2 stories because of that's all we had to fight down to get to him. If we had to go to the bottom floor, the 3rd one, it was just room clearing as usual. So, but not that I had a lot of experience at the time, but say compared to the hostage missions in Beirut that we'd also been training for during this time, this was a cakewalk. I mean, we knew which side of the door the hinges were on, you name it, and often with pictures to go along with it. So the intel was phenomenal, and we also had desensitizing flights that we could fly with the pilots. They had to be done in the daytime in Blackhawks, but allowed us to see the terrain, the streets, the numerous cemeteries with all the cover and concealment they offered around the building, and it desensitized the guards to a helicopter flying over the building low and slow, and nothing happening. So it seemed to work, but it was a big help to us.
That's awesome. Hey, Randy, same thing to you.
Yes, sir. Of course, there was a couple of things that made me kind of angry. The main thing that made me angry before we launched, just before H hour, somebody mentioned it on an unsecure radio coming over. I won't point fingers at who it was. And we got an order to up H hour by 30 minutes. As I say, all the rest of my teams only had 5 or 10 minute flights from Howard to get to their targets. I had a 70-mile flight over water, and we were able to. I mean, we were cranking. We were burning some hot turbines that night going down. We managed to make up about 15 minutes on the route down. And again, that one radio call really compromised my end of it as far as I was concerned, because they knew we were coming at that point because stuff was already going on back in Panama City. And and we took a lot of fire going in. I mean, a heavy ZSU fire going in, but thankfully the H-64 that accompanied us got tagged on at the last minute. And they didn't get a very good S2 brief, which again, another one of my points of anger, that the S2 had information that I didn't get either about this target site. It wasn't until after we returned that I found out about it. So my comment in the hot wash was that they was exact 100% successful in keeping enemy information out of the hands of friendlies. So anyway, I'd like to digress to a little bit of humor here, though. Those of you that were there at the commandancy in the prison know that we had an aircraft that was shot down over there. A guy named CW3 Fred Horsley, was a prior SF guy, went to flight school, and George Kunkel, who was a captain, who was with him. But after their crash, they got out, and during their E&E, they captured one of the PDF soldiers. And so they're trying to get out of the middle of all this AC-135 and everything else that's going on out there and running down the streets. And they finally went to a place where there was an APC, and the guy on the APC, of course, sitting up there with a 50 cal, they were telling them to halt, and they were going to kill them if they didn't stop. That was Kunkel, pretty sharp guy, West Point graduate. We had a running password. It was Bulldog was the running password. And he started saying, Bulldog, Bulldog, Bulldog. And the guy, halt, don't move any further. We'll shoot, and he fired a warning shot. And Kunkel goes, God damn it, Bulldog, don't you understand the running password? Anyway, that's when they started waving them on in. They came in, brought their prisoner with them. It was kind of funny. But anyway, it wasn't funny to them, I'm sure, during all of that E&E exercise, but it turned out to be pretty funny when they were telling the story.
Yeah. I can only imagine what was going through their head at the time.
Yep.
So what changed for you after Panama? You know, were you forced to improvise, adapt, to innovate? You know, based on things that you faced when you were there. I'll keep with you, Randy.
Well, the basic thing that changed for us, though, is we realized the whole time that whether it was an assault platform, little bird, or an attack platform like that, we needed more payload. We needed, better powertrains, better transmissions, and the payload being we developed so we didn't have to worry about a single minigun and a 7-shot rocket pod. We got to where we carried 2 miniguns, 8,000 rounds of ammunition, where we easily carry 14 rockets, could even hang other wing stores like Hellfire missiles and some of the air-to-air stuff we could put on there. And so it was a big boon for the ground force, to be able to have the extra resources available. I will tell you that commander I had that let us hang those 19-shot pods on there, he went out on a limb, because it certainly would have never passed an airworthiness review from the folks in St. Louis, but it panned out for us.
That's amazing. Hey, Jim, how about you?
Yeah, there was a lot of equipment that had to go through normal upgrades. Throat mic suck. Our comms got much better. The Kevlar helmet was one. Part of our weight restriction was the roof team wore Kevlar helmets, but no chicken plate. The guys going into the building doing the CQB wore their plates, but you can see there, a little plastic bicycle helmet. And we needed something in between the two, and unfortunately didn't get it until after Somalia. But the two things that were innovations for this mission because of this mission was, you see it there in the middle. We call it the Predator pack. The other was a 203 night sight. The Predator pack wasn't fired from that position. We didn't have a sleeve that would allow you to allow the ammo to bend like that, like you'd see on a minigun mounted on a vehicle or an aircraft. So what you did was you unhooked the right side, brought it around, and it fed the rounds without having an AG. So our saw gunner 60 and M60 and the Mag 58 you see there, all could be fired, and they get to carry all their own heavy ammo all by themselves. So that was also a blessing. The Mag 58 became what's known as the M240. It just has a sexy wooden buttstock instead of the plastic one the Americans have today. But it's the same machine gun, but hadn't been used by Americans in combat. I gotta do a real quick shout out to the 160th guys on this one. My buddy Sean, he was the saw gunner at the other short end of the wall, at the other side of the building. He was trying to consolidate all of his ammo into one long link belt without it getting tangled up. And so we were kicking around ideas, and I remember a Chinook is really just 20,000 rivets flying in formation, and the sheet metal guys for the 160th were right across the hangar from us. We took the idea to them. They got it. They took some measurements, and they were off and running. And we made a few modifications to the prototype. The key to it was a small spring clip that kept the ammo from falling back in or having to pull all that weight. The gun didn't have to pull all that weight out. It only had to make it through that one little spring clip. It was so successful. Maybe sheet metal guys might have hated us after this, but we came back and said, hey, can we make 2 more for the 7.62 guns?
Yeah.
And the saying is Night Stalkers never quit. Even it's not just in bars. The very next day, they popped 2 more out. We took them back, covered them with black material, black Vestex, black Velcro, make them sexy. So they're really cool. And they were very successful and used many times after.
That's awesome.
The other thing was the aim point. As you can see in that picture, the aim points were relatively new and sat on the carry handle of the rifle. We didn't have the flush Picatinny rails you have today. So when you raise the lease sight for the 203, the aim point was basically in the way. You were just guesstimating after 35 meters out. So I worked with our own arms room, and they developed a mount so the aim point could stay level and stay on target, and the weapon would pivot on the mount, and it had increments of 25-meter impact downrange. So you just counted the clicks and kept your sight right on the target, and it was great for night fire. You couldn't beat it, and you could just walk the rounds in because you had that red dot sitting right there. So yeah, H&K makes a one much like that. They didn't even give me an honorary the Gizmo site, but it's a much better site. Yeah, it's the same principle of aiming though, and it works real well to not have to look over or through the barrel to find your target. But that was the big innovations there.
All right.
We had.
Hey, Jay, what about you, brother?
Not so much innovation on my part, but what we did learn from that, or we took away from that, is that, I guess there's a misconception that when everybody comes through the Special Forces course or qualification course, that everybody's good at, you get that CQB portion, that close quarter battle, breach and everything else. But, you don't get that usually until later on. And the SIF companies, was their bread and butter. So being back in 1st Battalion, 7th Group, we didn't have all that training. So when we did get back, we found out that, we started pushing a lot more people through SOT, getting them through Sephardic. We had all the jungle stuff down. That was no worries about that. But that's where we kind of like picked up our training programs of getting more guys to shooting schools and things of that nature. So if we did have to go back into that environment, we would know how to properly clear a room with somebody else in the area, but not just moving through the jungle at the same time. So that was the biggest thing for us, was that transition of doing more jungle operations, moving more to the urban type stuff.
Gotcha. That's a good transition into kind of the next question or scenario is, what were the lessons learned? Did Panama or Just Cause change the way you did business in the future? How you trained new operators and how you led. You kind of touched on that. So if you want to pick up and just kind of expand on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, so planning, situational awareness, training, got more guys to school because, we were, even though, CQB can also be used in a jungle environment too. You're still just moving because, you had to clear buildings out there, drug labs, things of that nature. Moving in different type of elements. So I would say it transitioned that and just made you a better, well-rounded Special Forces soldier. So I would say, and also not just staying in your own planning bubble. Like I said, there was like 8-9 missions going on at night. And if you knew all the moving pieces to it, you really would understand how critical your portion was in order for that next piece to accomplish your mission also, so it was critical that we had to take out those communications towers.
Right.
So he could not get communications to some of his outer elements. So just knowing that whole big strategic picture.
Gotcha. How about you, Jim?
Yeah, my lesson, I was an E6, so my lesson learned wasn't an immediate thing that followed me, but it did grow with me through my career, and that's basically, historically, soft forces are usually operating in a conventional forces battle space, but we don't like to tell them we're doing that for a lot of various and valid reasons, good reasons. And what we didn't have and what we learned is, without an LNO, and it has to be a good LNO, communicating with that conventional force, it's just trouble in the making. Now, like I said, this just followed me through my career, but I saw the importance when I did staff time at SOC Cent with General Harold for the second invasion of Iraq. And we I saw the potential damage a bad LNO could do. You want to take the guy that you want to take into combat with you, not leave a guy that you don't. General Miller probably said it best, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he basically said, if you don't want to lose the guy you've picked to go be an LNO, then you've picked the right guy. And we saw that what the lack of one could do in Just Cause when we had a friendly fire incident out at Madden Dam. We were sent out to intercept an OH-58. It wasn't up on comms, and it wasn't an authorized flight. The 160 guys were sure they're going to be the first in the world to have an air-to-air engagement with a minigun and get the first aircraft down. But we forced them down. It was just two knuckleheads out for a joyride to see the war. You know, warrant officers, you can't promote them, can't fire them. And as we were waiting for our exfil, these Humvees came rushing up on us and started engaging us. Luckily, cooler heads prevailed. You know, they didn't know what was going on, and no one was hurt. But an LNO could have quickly avoided that. We saw it again in Desert Storm. We were across the border weeks before the ground war started, and two A-10s rolled in our position. We broke out a big American flag, and we called them on the radio. And after they authenticated us, they said in a thick Louisiana accent, "You boys know where you are?" To which we did. And it was decided we needed a unit, sent an LNO out to that unit. And it was the Louisiana Air Guard, an A-10 unit. And it was the right thing to do. They, as soon as they even thought we were getting in trouble listening to the radio, which was still only monitored by our guy, they would launch aircraft without permission and wait for permit,
Right.
forgiveness later. They were really our top cover. By Somalia, the unit had taken it a step further, and instead of having an LNO sit down with 10th Mountain and try to tell them how important something was, we brought their LNO down to our TOC, gave him a seat, let him see how things operated, and folded out. So when he called back to help prep or plan or whatever was needed, he's talking to people he knew. They knew him. He knew who was going to be effective down there. It wasn't just this burdenless guy that has taken up space in their top. So that was a great mix down there because we were geographically, at opposite ends of the airfield, and Mark and myself kind of ended up in that same position. And they were professionally, where we were down there, they were professionally polite, but they didn't know us. And what are you asking us? What kind of extra work do you want us to do? Is what it was at the time. So watching the progression of the LNO, even you can still keep your secrets and operate in their battle space and deconflict a lot of stuff. That was over time my takeaway.
That's a great lesson learned. Randy, do you got anything?
A couple of things I'd like to bring up, and he covered one of them here. We do or don't do certain things to maintain operational security. And although I can't blame what I mentioned earlier on the 8-hour compromise on that unsecure radio transmission, I do know that some Navy SEALs suffered immeasurably. I think all of you know that. They were totally compromised. They were ready and waiting on them when they came ashore. Other little anecdote is to expect the unexpected and presume that your primary course of action plans will soon digress to how well you plan your contingencies. And more often than not, commanders are going to need more resources that are reasonably available in a timely fashion, or you must be able to resort to on-the-fly solutions. And one can never have a guaranteed plan to avoid friendly fire incidents. And we suffered one of those while we were there.
Roger that.
In many other cases, and I know it's not possible, but for me as an aviator, we never had the same weapons the ground force did. I always had a 9mm and they had a 7.62 or a 5.56 or something. It's not that I want to have the same weapons they have. We need the weapons we have to do the mission, but we need to be able to give each other ammunition when one of them's low. It would have been nice when I was in Somalia if I had some 7.62 to kick out to Randy Sugart and those guys on the ground. I didn't have anything to give them, except what was in the minigun. But anyway, and we improved. We're now starting to carry, some M4 carbines and stuff like that as far as the aviation side. And in this mission, I think they did pretty well. A lot of missions I've been on just didn't have any clear rules of engagement. This one was pretty good this time, and I think everybody pretty much did what they wanted. There weren't any international incidents that I really come to memory. I can tell you in the last real fight I went in, they had the best rules of engagement, one but three of them. Said, one, this is who we want, catch him or kill him. Two, everybody in this country's got a gun. And it doesn't matter whether they're 7 years old or 10 years old, and that's okay unless they pointed at you and you do what you need to. And rule three, if you see something that looks like an anti-aircraft weapon, kill it. But anyway, I will tell you, after we were chasing Noriega around, after we didn't catch him right off the bat, and we had, and there were some questions came up about rules of engagement. I remember in a debrief, I was foolish enough to ask about it, and it was like I bit somebody or something. They jumped on me. Don't worry about that. Well, that's not a good reaction. If you can't do what an American citizen would do for self-preservation, and not worry about being hung or go to jail or whatever else it is when it's all over with, and you don't have a very good plan. Anyway, I'll be quiet.
No, those are great, Chief. Those are great points, and very heartfelt. Hey, Chief by God Randy Anderson, do we have any questions from the audience?
This is Chelsea Hamishin, but yes, we do.
Awesome.
Question one, did you have any interactions with the SEAL teams during the operation, and how was the joint coordination?
Jay, you want to take that one?
Well, I didn't have any contact with the Navy guys. I think they came in through Rio Hato and up through Tucuman. So I was up on the radio tower that night. So I had no interaction with those guys that evening.
How about you, Randy Jones?
Actually, I thought we were pretty blessed. We got a joint cell there together, everybody living in the hangar. We shared most of the information that we needed for the mission. And of course, we rehearsed together all the time before the mission. And of course, once we were in country, things went off pretty much without a hitch.
Chelsea, anything else?
Yeah, so why does Just Cause stand out to you compared to other operations that you've been on?
Jim?
Who else starts a war to capture one guy?
Yeah.
No, it was, we knew it as Blue Spoon up to that point, and we were jokingly calling it Just Because. But yeah, you talk to anybody in that country, and they were scared of that guy. Kurt himself can tell you, he heard the tortures of the failed coup attempt. They were kept in his prison. He definitely needed to go, and he had years of to correct himself, and never did.
All right, I got another one on email. It says, I've seen pictures showing references during this operation to Christmas, like overlapping with Christmas. How long was the operation, and did Christmas have any impact?
Jay, how long you ended up rolling back in mid-January, didn't you? Return home?
Yeah, we sure did. So another funny thing, I like to say, I spent Christmas in a jail, but I wasn't in jail. But we rolled in as part as they caught Noriega. We started filtering out to these other PDF units. Out towards Santiago, these other army and military installations and those corrupt police stations. So we had moved out in that area, a little country out there, and took over a police station that day just to restore order. End up arresting a lot of those guys in their element and sending them back. But yeah, Christmas was in the jail, but providing service to the locals. And like Jim had mentioned, the corruptness that was through the police force, the National Police Force, and the Panamanian Defense Force was of course horrific all across the board. He had to go, and people just loved us. They loved us already, but loved us even more when we start removing those guys out of power.
Was anyone else in jail for Christmas?
I was not in jail. I was listening to rock and roll music 24/7 for all through it. We were sitting around the Papa Nutria there. The Noriega did pop his head out the window. Two of our guys were covering that side, and he waved and politely said "Merry Christmas" to them in English, and they waved back, and he shut his window. But no jails.
Yeah, I'm like a lot of these guys. I think most of them probably missed more than one Christmas in the business that we were in, but you know, after a while it starts to drag out, and the theater commander kept his thumb on us for a long time before we got to go home, at least the last of our element. And I pulled up the rear, never failed, which I don't mind doing, but I had a little cliche I used to always say about that. As far as redeployment is concerned, you can rest assured a prudent decision will be made in an untimely manner.
Oh, that's awesome.
Hey, I wanted to clarify that I wasn't wanting to listen to the music. It was the PSYOPs music that was blaring.
Yeah.
And they were getting requests from Washington, congressmen and senators. And I heard, I fought the law and the law won. I don't know how many times, because that was their number one request.
That's amazing. The last question is for me, actually. I've been working with the Sante Raiders and a few other groups like that recently, and they all do annual reunions. Do you guys do an annual reunion at all for this?
Jay?
I'm sorry, I couldn't. She broke off a little bit at the end.
Oh, sorry. I was just asking if there was like a Just Cause reunion or every 10-year reunion kind of thing.
We have a C37 reunion every year since they moved away down in Tampa. Well, not in McDill, right? Yeah, but yeah, they do have a C37 reunion every year.
Awesome. Well, listen, this brings us to the conclusion of SOF Stories Live, Operation Just Cause. On behalf of the Global SOF Foundation, I'd like to extend a heartfelt thank you for your service to the nation and candidly sharing your personal experiences to our viewers. It's been an honor to see you guys. Some of you I haven't seen in a while. And, again, thank you. Enjoy your holidays. Enjoy the time with your families. Back to you, Randy.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you for what you do for Task Force Dagger and that entire effort. And also a special thank you to our distinguished guests for participating in today's discussion. I know it's very difficult to find the time to do this, so we really, really appreciate your insight. Mostly, I'd like to thank the viewers for your participation, asking the questions. Please be sure to join us in January as our next moderator and selected guests will explore their recollections of Operations Desert Shield and Desert Storm, the liberation of Kuwait. We look forward to having you join us again. Until then, on behalf of the Global SOF Foundation and SOF Stories Live, I am the host, Chief Master Sergeant Randy Anderson, U.S. Air Force retired Air Commando. Good afternoon and God bless America.